Alright, we are back with a new video, and we are back updating the power rankings for Survivor 43 following episode 8. And this episode was mostly standard. I mean, the boot itself didn't really change the game too much, but there were still a few fun moments here and there that made it a little bit interesting. But there are 11 players to talk about, and let's not waste any more time, let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 11, we have the boot from this week, and here we have Janine. And I never thought Janine had much of a shot to win the game, and especially not once the season began and we saw her edit. Now I did bump her up a few spots last week as I felt like she got some decent content after the vote, although it was pretty funny seeing her losing her idol. Although it was pretty cool seeing in this episode that the idol is still in the game, but just in Jesse's hands, but we'll talk more about that a bit later. But really, I felt like Janine didn't have much of a shot. Although, if I'm being honest, I felt like she would have been less of a threat now that she didn't have much power in the game. Although we did see the majority alliance stick together and agreed to this consensus vote to take out Janine, I personally felt like it would have been a bit better for them if they had tried going for someone like an Owen around this stage, or maybe a Gabler. But again, I can at least see the rationale for them going for Janine here. And on the whole, I felt like Janine was pretty underwhelming. I felt like she never really had much control in the game, and I feel like very few things went right for her in the game. Obviously, there's the fact that she and Ellie were targeted after the first tribal. She didn't really get her way during the Mariah vote. She obviously loses her idol and her closest ally in very quick succession after the merge, and she is never able to gain much traction thereafter, so it's not too surprising to see her go out here. And because of that, she is here at number 11. And with that, there are 10 players left in the game to talk about. And as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely they are to win the game, based on their current game position as well as their edit. And we are entering an interesting phase of the game where obviously we saw from the coming attraction that next week will be a split tribal where 2 people will be voted out. And on the face of it, I'm not expecting this to be an overly interesting round of gameplay here. I am sort of expecting the majority alliance to sit together based on recent history, although we won't know for sure until the actual groups are decided. But at number 10, the person I believe is the least likely to win the game right now is Ryan. And I'm going to be honest, I did think for a decent chunk of the episode that Ryan was going to be the boot here, as I felt like the edit was dunking on him early on, like with people talking about how he's just fishing all the time and how he's never really bonding with people. Not to mention Sammy talking about getting rid of Ryan in order to try to play both sides. And admittedly, I felt like it would have been the wrong move for the majority alliance to take out Ryan here. So I feel like by then taking out Janine over Ryan, they were making the right move. But I still felt like the edit was setting up a Ryan move for a lot of the episode. But obviously, he stays. And even so, I still feel like he has no shot of winning. I feel like the edit still really dunked on him during a lot of the episode, and it dunked on him several times before as well. So I feel like through that, he doesn't really have much of a path to win the game. But the main thing I will say about him is we did see him talking with Gabler earlier on in the episode, which did make me think that could be a relationship for them moving forward. But it could also just as easily be an excuse to vote out Ryan during the split tribal, as again, depending on the configuration, Sammy could use this as an excuse to make a move against Ryan. So either way you slice it, I don't feel like Ryan is likely to win the game from this point, and because of that, he is here at number 10. Now we're moving on to number 9, and we have someone very similar to Ryan, and here we have Gabler. Now, Gabler was pretty quiet in this episode, which was pretty funny considering he just got this big edit in the last episode, which really made it feel more circumstantial than anything else. And I feel like Gabler's in a similar spot to Ryan. I mean, I could see him going out in the split tribal, but I could also see him being dragged along, which, as I said before, isn't really great for his overall winning chances. I don't feel like Gabler really wins a jury vote at the end. I don't feel like people are going to have much respect for him. So I feel like him and Ryan are on the same boat. Although the flip side of that is that we could see the two of them working together. So at least there's that. But realistically, I don't feel like they're winning the game either, and because of that, they're here at number 9. Now we're moving on to number 8, and we have another player I'm not feeling super confident about, although I feel like they have more of a case to actually win the game than Ryan or Gabler, but obviously they still have a tough path getting there. But here we have Noel, and again, I feel like Noel isn't winning the game either. I don't feel like the edit is there for a Noel win, although I feel like she has more of a case to actually win than Ryan or Gabler. I feel like she's someone who, if she got to the end, would be more likely to win a jury vote than Ryan or Gabler. And plus, she does have the vote steal going into this split tribal, which, depending on the configuration that she gets, could be beneficial to her. Now, obviously, the flip side to that is that I could also see her being targeted during the split tribal, as she doesn't really have many allies at this point. She's not that well positioned. And I could see people making the case that she would be this big underdog that could win a jury vote at the end. So, realistically, I don't feel like she's winning the game either, but I feel like she's more likely to win the game if she were to make it far than Ryan or Gabler, which is why I do have her a bit higher at number 8. Now we're moving on to number 7, and I feel like this person has continued to slide in each successive power ranking, and obviously now they're here, but here we have Cassidy, and Cassidy was shown not getting her way here. Her only content in the episode comes right before Tribal, where she talks about obviously taking out Ryan, how this would be revenge, and how like she would be stopping this trend of the women being voted out over and over again, which is something I haven't really touched upon yet, in that we only have 3 women left in the game at the final 10, which is pretty crazy to think about. But she talks about that, and really all this content does is establish why she votes for Ryan here. Now, I do feel like she knew that Janine was probably going home here, and through that, like, she just decided she wasn't going to vote out Janine, which obviously could be seen as a positive in that it could explain why Cassie would get Janine's jury vote if she was somehow able to make it to the end. But realistically, outside of that, I don't feel like Cassidy has much of an edit here. She doesn't have much of a storyline to back up her win here, and especially considering how she's talked about, like, how she's going to be this big player who's hiding in the background, but yet we see her actively not get her way over and over again. So I feel like at this point, I'm not that confident in Cassidy winning, and because of that, she is here at number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and we have another Coco member to talk about here, and here we have James. And James is another figure that I'm still not that confident in. I feel like his game position is pretty solid, but the edit is just not there for him. And I feel like at this point in the game, I can't really have him in that high contention. Now, realistically, I could see him making a deep run still. I could imagine him being in the end game. But I feel like given how quiet his edit has been and how he hasn't really gotten much credit for a lot of these big moves, I feel like it's not really going to work out for him. I mean, yes, he does vote in the majority here. And yes, we do see him talking about voting out like Ryan or Janine. But at the end of the day, I feel like obviously more credit goes to other people. Like, I feel like Cody gets a decent amount of credit for voting out Janine here, and Sammy is the one leading the charge for taking out Ryan. So really, that leaves James with not much, and I feel like he's not winning the game either, and because of that, he is here at number 6. Now we're moving on to number 5, and we have another player that I am not that confident in winning the game, but here we have Owen. And the main reason I have Owen higher than he was last week is because of his content in this episode. He did get more personal content in this episode, which really doesn't move the needle for me. I feel like this is sort of reminiscent of Ricard from 41 again, where despite him like getting like sporadic personal content, he still got some personal content here and there. And I feel like Owen got that here, where again, just random personal content in this episode. You know, like, and while that's pretty good, I mean, it's not boding well for him actually winning the game. And obviously, considering that he was the target going into the round and that he had to win immunity, I mean, I feel like you could argue it was very circumstantial. And I would say it's circumstantial. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes back to being pretty quiet again the next week as well. So really, I don't feel like Owen's winning the game either. I feel like the edit just isn't there either. He's really been scraping by and really getting weird like spikes in content, but weird like patterns as well that don't really give me much confidence, and his storyline just isn't very cohesive for me. So because of that, I do have to leave him here at number 5. Now I'm moving on to number 4, and really my view of this person didn't really go down per se. It's just that my view of another person went up. But here we have Carla, and Carla did sort of take a backseat here again. Now, she did get some content earlier in the episode where she gets to talk about possibly voting out Ryan here, which, considering that Carla didn't have that great of a relationship with Ryan, I mean, kind of makes sense. Although by the end, like, she doesn't do that. She votes out Jeannie instead. just really is a minor character in the story. However, I feel like Carla is someone who will still be taken out. I feel like all of my arguments against Carla still stand, and it's for that reason that I had to leave her here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and we actually have someone who dropped from their previous placement here, and here we have Sammy. Now, Sammy got a weird edit in this episode, where I said last week that he voted out Dwight without much explanation, only for this episode where we kind of get an explanation, where, or at least he is explaining to like Janine and to Noel why he votes out Dwight, but we don't actually see him in confessional talking about this move. Instead, I feel like we're getting the perspective of Noel and Janine, the people who are on the outs of this vote, over Sammy, which isn't great. And I feel like that didn't present Sammy in the best light and didn't really give me what I was looking for there. And obviously from there, he does have a pretty big episode. We do get to see more of his gameplay here, where he is trying to play the middle, and he does seriously consider flipping here, where he is leading this charge to take out Ryan here in order to maintain a strong position moving forward, only for him to not get his way here. He does ultimately vote out Janine, which I do think is probably the correct strategic decision, I guess. But it's also a big knock to his edit here, where why would they choose this episode to highlight his story arc of him being a big player and him pushing for this move when he doesn't even go through with the move and sort of contradicts his whole statement about how he needs to make big moves in order for someone like him to win the game? I feel like it's really bad on his end. And I feel like it only solidified my view of him as a losing finalist, where I feel like at this point I am really starting to lean towards him being a losing finalist. You know, like someone who is probably going to start to make more moves along the way, but along the way we do see him like doing things that causes the jury to not really respect him. And I feel like that's going to be a problem for him. I feel like even in this episode, I feel like the way he interacts definitely could lead to Janine not voting for him at the end. So I feel like that seed is laid there, although it wasn't as active as certain other cases. But I just feel like this was not a good episode for Sammy. I feel like we're probably going to see more of these knocks crop up over time, to where eventually by the end, we're going to see why the jury does not vote for him at the end, despite him trying to play the middle and despite him trying to make all these big moves. And it's for that reason that I did bump him down this week. Now, again, I don't think he's completely dead. I mean, I feel like there is still kind of a possibility that he could still scrape it out, but I feel like this episode was kind of an indictment against him. And I feel like through that, he's probably less likely to actually win the game now and more likely to lose a jury vote. So I feel like for those reasons, I can't really have him higher than number 3 here. Now moving on to number 2. And as I said, this person did move up from last week. Although even then, I still have plenty of doubts surrounding them. But here we have Jesse. And I do feel like this was a better episode for Jesse, where obviously we did find out that he now has Janine's idol, which was a pretty fun moment there, a pretty fun reveal, where it turns out that Dwight gave Jesse his idol right before Tribal, and I feel like that does justify the move to take out Dwight here, where before I did criticize Cody and Jesse for not making the right move here, but now knowing that Dwight gave them the idol, it makes sense why they would cut Dwight, as Dwight could easily rat out to Janine that her idol is still there and that Jesse has it, which obviously could be used against them. So obviously by taking out Dwight, it's making it so that it's less likely that this idol gets found out. And we do see Janine genuinely believe that Dwight got voted out with her idol in his pocket. So I feel like that alone was pretty good. But on top of that, I just feel like we're starting to see Cody and Jesse more as a duo. Now, granted, I do feel like Cody is being propped up more than Jesse. And I feel like through that, Cody is probably more likely to win at the end. But I feel like it's also made clear at this point that Jesse would also win if he somehow were to get to the end. And that if Cody were somehow taken out along the way, like maybe due to Carla flipping against him, that I feel like Jesse would be more likely to inherit the win equity that Cody has. So I feel like through that, Jesse is someone who still could win the game. However, I feel like there's plenty of concerns surrounding him. I feel like if I had to choose between Cody and Jesse winning the game, I would choose Cody winning the game. And I feel like Jesse could still fall out at some point. I could see him being voted out with an idol in his pocket. I could see him just being taken out as a big threat. And I feel like he is less likely to be this underdog figure later on compared to Cody. So I feel like through that, Jesse is probably not number one for me, and realistically someone who could still be taken out. But I feel like compared to Sammy, Jesse is way more likely to win a jury vote. I feel like if Jesse got to the end against anyone other than Cody, then he probably wins. And realistically, if Cody and Jesse got to the end together, which I don't think is happening, I think Jesse would win that. So I feel like Jesse is someone who could actually win the game if we were to get to the end. And I feel like there is some evidence to back that up. However, I feel like I'm more confident in the number one person to do so. So because of that, I have him here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the person I believe is the most likely to win Survivor 43 right now is Cody, the same person that I had at number 1 last week. And I still feel like this was a good episode for him. He does get his way here in voting out Janine. He is the one who talks about like needing things to say simple. And sure enough, that's what happens here. He does get his way. And plus, I feel like Cody and Jesse are being established as this pretty strong duo that could run the game moving forward. Again, I also feel like the knowledge that Jesse has Janine's idol and that Dwight handed it over justifies the move from a gameplay perspective. So there's that. I feel like in general, Cody's decision to vote out Janine over Ryan was the correct strategic move from a gameplay perspective. And that's all pretty good. I feel like Cody and Jesse are being set up as this power duo and sort of the protagonists of the season at this point. And I also feel like Cody is more likely to be an underdog than Jesse. I feel like if there comes a point where like they recognize that Cody and Jesse are a big threat, I feel like Jesse is more likely to be voted out over Cody. And I feel like after that, Cody has it more in him to scrape on by, to win immunities, to do whatever it takes for him to win the game. Now, will that happen? I don't know. I could also see Cody being one to flip against Jesse at the very end to ensure his win. So I feel like the edit is propping him up in that regard. And plus, something I actually forgot to mention last week is Carla. I mean, obviously earlier in the season, we did see like Carla like talking about how Cody was this big threat after the raid. And I feel like at this point, could Cody be the one to take out Carla? And I feel like that's a very realistic possibility. I could see like if Carla is supposed to be this final obstacle for the eventual winner to take out in order to win the game, that Cody could be the one to do that. So I feel like no matter how you slice it, there are a number of ways in which Cody could be propped up moving forward. Whereas I feel like there are fewer ways for Jesse to be propped up. But it's just the combination of Cody having a lot of the win equity that someone like a Sammy lacks, while still having the storyline to scrape it out and the flexibility in order to do that, that really makes me feel confident that Cody will win this game. And it's for that reason that I have him here at number 1. And there we go. That will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out with the channel. Now, obviously, I'll be back again next week to update the power rankings again, so stay tuned for that. I am also covering the Amazing Race 34 as that is coming out, so stay tuned for updates on that. And if you haven't already, be sure to join my Discord server, which I'll leave a link to join in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way. But for now, that is the video. See ya.